Right?
Yep, we are officially recording the meeting.
All right. Well, good. Well, good morning, everyone. Great to see you. Welcome to the State COG Board of Directors for Thursday, March 18th. And we're going to go ahead and begin. Great to see you. Welcome to, there we go. Everyone will turn off their video on their computers. We'll go ahead and begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, please. And so with that, Director Maines, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Absolutely. Please stand. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Director Maines. And so now we'll have roll call, please. Renee, if you could please call the roll.
Yeah.
Folks, to get yourselves ready on, take yourself off mute, as you know it's almost your turn, so we can move through these quickly.
Thank you. As Chair Gore said, today's date is March 18th, 2021. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. If you are a board member and would like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or press *9 if you're participating telephonically. Directors Baines?
Here.
Thank you. Bernasconi?
Here.
Bradford?
Here.
Branscombe?
Here.
Olahan? Absent. Burris?
Here.
Clark-Kretz?
Here.
Desmond?
Here.
Frericks?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Gallardo?
Here.
Gog?
Yes.
Guerrero?
Here.
Harris?
Here.
Joyner? Absent. Kennedy?
Here.
Kozlowski? Lozano?
Here.
Thank you. Middleton?
Here.
New?
Here.
Sander? Absent. Saragosa?
Here.
Saylor? Absent. Chenier?
Here, and my apologies on the video. I'm having some challenges with it.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Spokley? Absent. Stallard?
Here.
Soon?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
West?
Here.
Vice Chair Jennings?
I am here.
Chair Gore?
Here.
And ex officio member Benapal?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. And do you have any other things you need to address before we move on?
I do not. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Then before we get started, I just wanted to give a few updates. First of all, an update about our Race Equity and Inclusion Working Group. We'll have James talk about that a little bit later, but I did want to let you know that we intend to have 10 board members, 10 of our directors and 10 non-board members, much like the Commercial Corridor Task Force that we had last year. I've asked Vice Chair Jennings to chair the committee, and then Director Frericks to serve as the vice chair, since he served as chair last year, so that'll allow us to have some continuity. So really appreciate those of you who have offered to participate. We've had about a dozen board members share that they'd like to be a part of the working group, and I'll have staff work with you all on schedules to see how that all works out and see who all can participate in the working committee. So thank you to Chair Jennings and Director Frericks for helping lead the initiative. And then one other item on my end, I'm happy to say that we've appointed Ileton City Council member Paul Steele and going to serve on the Delta Protection Commission, representing the cities within Yolo and Sacramento County. And Councilmember Steele's first commission meeting to that committee is today. So those announcements out of the way, we're going to move to public communication. And this is the time for anyone who wishes to address this board on an item that is not on our agenda. So Renee, do we have any public comments that we received via email prior to this meeting, or is there a member of the public who wishes to participate in public comment?
We do not have any public comment.
All right, and no one has raised their hand. So with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we will move to the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent.
Second, Baines.
All right. There's a motion and a second. I want to make sure, did anyone want to remove an item from the consent calendar, Renee? Or anybody from the public?
No.
All right, great. So I'm not sure who made the motion, and Renee, did you get that?
I believe it was Gog and Baines.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second for the consent calendar, and we will take a roll call, please.
Thank you. Directors Baines,
Aye.
Bernasconi,
Yes.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Houlihan. I want to note for the record, she is here, but I think she might be having some technical difficulties. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one. Burris.
I can put it on you. No, I was helping you, so you don't even have to
Oh.
get up.
So, oh, go ahead and, okay. Gallardo, or I'm sorry, Clark Kretz.
Aye.
Desmond.
Aye.
Frericks,
Aye.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Harris,
Yes.
Joyner, absent still, Kennedy,
Aye.
Kozlowski. Kozlowski, would you indicate your vote, please? Okay, I will come back to him. Lozano?
Aye.
Thank you. Middleton?
Aye.
New?
Aye.
Sander?
Aye.
Thank you. Saragosa?
Aye.
Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier?
Aye.
Spokley?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Soon?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
West?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jennings?
Aye.
And Chair Gore?
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, I did receive I'm sorry. I did receive a note from Director Kozlowski that he does vote yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Renee. All right, we'll move to action item number 9 on our agenda, which is the charge for the Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group. And James Corliss, if you want to go ahead and present this item, please.
Well, thank you, Chair Gore, and I appreciate your reference earlier at the top of the meeting to the fact that this working group this year, in some ways, really a follow-on to the work that happened last year, but per the charge, will be a working group of no more than 20 with 10 board members, and as you said, much like the Commercial Quarter Task Force last year, 10 non-board members, stakeholders that we think is going to be really important. The memo highlights, especially for the new board members, the work that was undertaken last year. As I said, we did have a race, equity, inclusion working group last year. We hired a consultant. We had an audit produced, and at the very end of the year, into the calendar year, which is all linked through that memo, we developed a racial equity framework. And that framework really is what carries forward into this year's work with this Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group. Chair Gore has mentioned that she has named Vice Chair Jennings as the chair of that working group and Rick Frericks as the vice chair. There was a lot of work undertaken by the working group last year. They met monthly. They tackled some really important issues. I myself think this is a really important body of work for this agency to undertake. It's important for, in many ways, the success of our region, economically, the success of the work that we do, even in the transportation, land use, and growth space, our very core mission. The charge in front of you, which we have in front of you for action today, as you've noted, for adoption, really lays out and updates the charge from last year. This is a charge that you would similar to adopting for any of your standing committees, but it lays out the work that's ahead, the priorities that we think the working group needs to take on. I would definitely refer you to the framework as well. I hope you've had a chance to look at that. There's a lot of listen and learn in this year still. As we said many times last year in the REI working group, we do not have all the answers, but we believe we're asking really important questions. Disparities and racism still exists. It is not a SACOG problem. It is not a Sacramento problem. It is a problem. And while we don't believe we can fix it all single-handedly, we also don't believe that we can be silent anymore and pretend it's not there. You heard an excellent presentation, I believe, in last month's board meeting around the history and frankly, the role of government in structural racism and disparities in housing. I can tell you, given in my career and my experience, there's a very similar history in transportation that's a little less known even. It's a very important question, what can SACOG do? But again, it's a question we're asking, and we want this working group to focus on this year. I would say too, and it's outlined in your charge, as a background and as also as a reminder, we actually have to advance equity, racial equity, social equity, environmental justice by law, by mandate, both in housing and in transportation. Increasingly, we believe we are also going to have to get to be proactive, which is really, I think, one of the themes here. Our work as a planning profession, I would say to simplify this, the last 40 years has really been a do no harm, prove no harm kind of a mandate. And I think what we are trying to get to is a much more proactive, how can we be inclusive? How can we reduce disparities? How can we be humble in those areas where we do have something to say and something to do and where we don't? And how can we build a culture at this agency and in this region of inclusion and equity and racial equity? Because I believe, as many others do, that really is the key to our ultimate success. And I just close, and again, it says here in the charge as well, I think the way in which a lot of the state grants, the transportation grants, the housing grants in California are heading is that we cannot just check boxes anymore. We have to be thoughtful and intentional and use a lot of data, which is still very emerging and nascent. But it is something that is in our wheelhouse. When somebody asks us, how does this transportation project address equity? We need to have a good answer. And increasingly, if we don't have a good answer, we're not going to win competitive grants at the state level. And I would suggest too, given where I think the federal administration is heading, with executive orders, but also with the new US DOT secretary and many others, we're going to have to answer those questions as well, and thoughtfully and genuinely at the federal level. So there's a lot of reasons to do this work. I'm not before you today thinking it's not fraught, that it sometimes can't be controversial, but it's something certainly as your executive director, I feel very strongly about. A lot of our other COGs, by the way, both in California and around the country, are grappling with this same issue. And I think really in somewhat of a new light. So there's a good peer network. I know many of your cities and counties have also looked at taking on adopting resolutions, but really trying to incorporate this at the local level as well. So there's, I think, an excellent opportunity for some peer learning and some peer networking. And again, forgive the somewhat lengthier than normal explanation of a charge, but especially for our new board members, I really wanted just to outline a little bit of the importance of this working group, a bit of the history from last year, which many of our veteran board members will remember, the charge going forward, and why in particular I think this work is so very important. not just our agency, but to, as I said, the future of our region. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have some staff who are able to answer questions, and thanks very much.
Thank you, James. It looks like we do have a couple of questions. Supervisor Frost.
Yes, I wanted to ask James, you mentioned, it seemed like you were mentioning specific law around housing and transportation as it relates to our responsibility in providing equity. And I was wondering if you could, you don't have to say it right now, but maybe forward us
Sure,
the laws that pertain to that so that we can look at that.
Yep.
And I also was reviewing this working group charge, and a question comes to my mind around, you know, what were the activities of the working group in supporting the implementation of a framework around advancing racial equity. Does this framework also include equality? Because equality is a foundation of American law. So I don't see, I see in the first bullet point, it says supporting implementation of framework of advancing racial equity. So I'm saying, does this mean understanding current equity and how we can make it better? Or does this include equality? Because in the fourth bullet, it says exploring data to better understand. And does that data include law, the current law, the Constitution and current California law and national law, so that we can understand the environment that we're working within, since every single one of the board members here took an oath to uphold the law of California and the national Constitution. It's a question.
Director Frost, I guess I would say, well, first of all, on the, speaking of your, I think, more specific questions about the laws, I'd be happy to forward those. I might even ask Dov Caden, who's going to present the Mind the Gap presentation on housing next, maybe if he could at least reference, it's a mouthful, but the AFFH, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, because we as a region and you all as local governments are right in the middle of that right now. There are many also on the transportation side, executive orders, all the way back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that we are governed by. I guess I'm trying to give you a succinct answer on your equity versus equality. Director Harris and I have had a really good back and forth. And I don't think we have time to do it really a lot of justice right now, but I would say we are focused very much on equity. I mean, understanding the realm of the law as it exists, and we spent some time last year on this. But in my mind, the concept of equity is we have to work harder to be more inclusive. We have to be mindful of past injustices and disparities, and we have to understand that. And I think you're asking a sort of a definitional question, and I am aware of the sort of equity versus equality debate, but we're very focused on the concept of equity because we believe that we have to be proactive and because we believe that there are still major disparities that exist. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'd be happy to send you some more thoughts offline about this.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that it's not really about what the focus was on equity, which is different than equality. I think it's not quite the same thing, but I think in the framework, when we're bringing, you know, the private citizens in a public-private partnership to have a conversation around what's going to advise policy, I think equality and the law should be included in the framework. And I'm wondering if this board would consider just including that in the framework of this, so that it can be part of the research and the conversation around it.
Well, we will have because we have a lot of new board members expressing interest, because we have these 10 new stakeholders that we're proposing be part of this. I'll certainly go back with the staff and talk about, we have to have a foundational meeting in some ways, right? The first working group. I also, in the listen and learn theme of the framework, remember the racial equity framework was developed last year, brought to the board in December, link is in your packet. I think also there's really important, as we did in last month with Stephen Menendian from UC Berkeley, I think there's some really important framing and learning, and I'll certainly look at speakers that I think need to come to the full board and talk more about this.
No, I'm talking about we're adopting this today, right?
You're adopting the charge. Yep.
So if we're adopting the charge, shouldn't the charge include equality and the law? That's the question. Can we amend it to include equality in the law as we're processing and reviewing data and information to promote equity? Can we include that? I guess I'm asking for an amendment.
So thank you, Director Frost. Let's do this. Let's take we've got a couple other questions, and we can come back around to see if we land on that.
Thank you.
Director Guerrero, and then Director Soon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the areas that I've observed in racial inequities is, as a result of that, over the years, in several generations, there's a level of poverty that, these families continue to remain in. And they are reliant on public social services, which really at this point, and we're working on that in the legislature, don't help them to get out of poverty. And so as a result of that, they end up relying on public social services, and they don't have the means, they don't have, financial stability to open up, to get a credit card. And so when they need to try to find a job, they rely on the public transportation, and they don't have like a way to be able to tap into that. So I know we're working on trying to help them in that area, but I don't see, public benefits or social services included in the charge. And I'm not asking for an amendment, but I'm asking at least for the group to take into consideration these particular programs, which is the area that we are going in. For example, CalWorks housing. CalWorks provides housing support, which is like a grant in order for them to be able to pay for rent. And so programs like that are going to be what we are trying to get the nexus for them to get out of poverty and into getting good jobs in the future. And so things like that are what I'd like this particular group and this focus to include as we move forward.
Thank you, Director Guerrero. Director Soon, and then Director Frericks.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to try to speak a little to Director Frost's comment about including equality. The whole purpose of this isn't about equal treatment. It's giving a little bit more help to folks who are in a disadvantaged situation. I'm gonna take a leap here and guess, Director Frost, that perhaps you and I are similar in the sense that if we were given equal opportunities, we could succeed or do okay on things. But what I believe what we're trying to address here are individuals and families and a demographic that is put in a significant disadvantaged position proportionally, and we're trying to give a little extra help, little more helping hand, so that they can have an opportunity to be successful. I don't think anybody is trying to say they must have better outcomes than anybody else, but they might need a little bit more help to give them an actual fighting chance, if you will. And that's the way I view this what this charter and what we're trying to go after. And I would say equal treatment would be fine if everybody was put on the same playing field, but the the data shows that there's a significant demographic that is put at significant disadvantage, and that is what we're trying to correct and create better opportunities for. So that's just my perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Frericks and then Kozlowski.
Sure. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. And Director Soon, I appreciate your comments and appreciate Director Frost's raising of this issue. I mean, I want to just sort of add a little bit to what Director Soon said. I think, was very much right on with his sort of, comments there. I think that, while these terms, equity and equality are often used interchangeably, they really are frankly quite different. I mean, fairness is the goal. Equality and equity are both processes which we can achieve it, but equality really means, everyone, it simply means everyone is treated the same exact way, regardless of the need or of any individual's difference. Equity really means that people are provided what they need to succeed. And, I think that, you sort of think of it oftentimes as sort of the like, equality is giving everyone, the sort of the same pair of shoes, right, to walk around during the day. But equity really is that sort of issue of giving everyone a pair of shoes that fits. And I think that, we first of all I've been appreciative of the work that's been done over the course of the last year and the sort of engagement of, last year anyway, half the board, just on the actual working group, including many folks who are here today. And obviously I'm so appreciative that there's so many, a third of the board is new this year, and there's still a lot of interest by folks to serve and sort of work on this issue. I do think that, as part of the work, certainly we could be, we should have a discussion about the differences between equality and equity. I think that is something that should absolutely be occurring because they are different. And then with regard to the issues of the law, I don't think first of all, I would say SACOG, we all as elected officials are, upholding our oath to protect and serve the Constitution of both the United States of America and also the state of California. And I think the organization SACOG is doing the same. And so I don't think there's any, that's a pretty sort of basic sort of tenet of what we all do as elected officials. And so I don't know that we have to explicitly state in a charter for this working group that we are going to follow the law. I think that's sort of inherent in the work that we do as elected officials. But I appreciate Director Frost raising this issue about equality versus equity. I think they are different, and I think they're both important. But if we want to have a robust discussion or more than one over the course of the year ahead on the issues and sort of differences between equality and equity, like as far as I'm concerned, we should be wanting to have those conversations.
Thank you, Director Frericks. Appreciate that. Director Kozlowski and then Director Shamir.
I just have a comment on the term for this particular.
Hey, Mike, we can't hear you very well. Maybe turn up your volume.
If I get a lot closer, is that better?
It's a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm having some audio difficulties. I was just going to suggest that the work of this particular committee is, it probably warrants a little longer service term than 1 year. That's all. I think the structure as it's aligned is fine, though. Thank you.
Thank you. A very good point. Appreciate that, because this is work that will continue ongoing. And Director Shamir.
Thanks very much. And Mike, I think the longer terms and maybe a staggered number of years for various people, so we can ensure continuity, but also continue to get new voices into this is going to be important. I want to support my colleagues, and I think Lucas said it very well. I'm not sure which pair of shoes I get to wear. That changes probably, but I think what's most important for us and the biggest danger is taking time off task. I'm sorry. I think it's important that we keep very, very focused. And the question that's been raised and the work that's been done is really around equity. The question and the purpose on this is really to make sure all of our jurisdictions have what they need to be successful. And those needs are very, very different across the jurisdictions. How we develop our programs and our policies and our procedures to make sure that we can get all of our jurisdictions to at least some baseline and then beyond is the work that we're going to be undertaking within this initiative. And so I want to respect the work that's been done. I want to respect Supervisor Frost's proposal. I don't agree with it on this because I think it could take us off task. I want us to be very, very focused on the equity issue. That's what this is about for us. But I'm sure those conversations will have depth and be thoughtful, and I look forward to them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Jennings, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to let you know that I appreciate the vote of confidence in me to chair this committee. And Lucas, I'm glad that you will be on from last year because I'm going to need your leadership. And I'm going to need the leadership of everyone as far as a board member that has signed up to be on this committee. And I'm also encouraged by the names of the community leaders that we've identified to come on the committee as well. And I do see this conversation on equity and equality as one that we will have many times as a committee. And what I would ask us to do today is to have a little trust and faith in the committee and the process that we can come out of it with something that the board will be pleased with. And we can be intentional, we can be thoughtful, we can be proactive, all the things that James has identified today. And we can do that. And we can come back and really be proactive in making progress in this region and bring back a charge and a racial equity and inclusion platform that we can be proud of as a SACOG board, as a region, as community leaders, something that can help inform the entire region and each one of our cities and our areas. So I just really ask that this charge that we have today, let us go forward and bring this work back to the board, because everything that the committee does will come back to the board. And then we can continue to have these robust conversations in moving this work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jennings. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's open this up for public comment, please, in case we've any questions or input from the public. Sorry.
We do not have any public comment for this item.
All right. I'm going to bring it back to the board. And, you know, I want to share that I appreciate this dialogue, and I appreciate that these are challenging topics to discuss. One of the ways I look at it is we look at the things that SACOG is charged to do. We look at projects, transportation, and housing. And if we even have that conversation, and we think about the housing conversation we had last month, and just understanding that there are people in communities that have not had the same opportunity in the past, and it has affected how things have played out in current day. And there are communities that have not had the same access to transportation or the same type of access to housing in their communities. And so as we grapple with this, it's not about it's more about larger projects and as we move forward, and how do we make sure that every community has opportunity, not just the communities that are well off in Granite Bay or Rancho Murrieta, but every community has opportunity to benefit from transportation and housing that'll make their communities stronger and better. And so I share that in light of, we're looking at sort of the bigger picture as the work we do at SACOG, and to help our local jurisdictions as well, make this a really great community no matter where it is that you live. So I share that. And with that, unless there are any other comments, we can go ahead and move forward with, let's see, we do have Supervisor Frost and then Supervisor Saylor.
I just want to thank everyone for your input. I want to say that I was on this working group. I appreciate that there are those who fall through the cracks or don't have the same environment growing up, or may not be born with the same skill set. I also have a huge appreciation for you know, the way America was founded, and the fact that we have inalienable rights and natural rights, and that we have, you know, our Constitution and our laws have set us up for equal opportunity. Equity is about, you know, delivering equal results, where equality is equal opportunity. And while, you know, that conversation around those underserved communities is important, I think it's also important to ask ourselves, you know, while we're providing equity, what are we taking from whom? And will they be inspired, and will they realize the same American independence and freedom, you know, that they are due under the law? And so I think keeping in mind, you know, our foundational laws while we're looking at equity is important. And I also think it's important to explore more deeply when we're looking at data, you know, why are there certain communities that are not able to excel or fly, you know, and what can we do to give them a better educational foundation or a better community? So I think the work is really important, but you know, and I don't understand why putting equality in the conversation is a problem to create a foundation of, you know, where we're working from, since that's who we are as Americans. People come here because of the opportunity in America. That's why we have immigrants, because they want to come here because they perceive that they can achieve their dreams here. So I do appreciate this work and respect it. And I'm not trying to be, you know, that one person in 29 that's always, you know, creating this opposing point of view, but I would like to see that in this foundational, as a foundational tenet in describing where we're working from in this working group, so that, you know, we're on that same understanding, you know, so that the group who's working on equity is understanding equality. So I would support it if you could find a way to put equality in there as part of the exploration. You know, that's, you know, what I'm hoping the board will consider, just putting, you know, equality in the foundational structure of this work group.
Thank you, Director Frost. Director Saylor?
Chair Gore, I'd like to move approval of the framework for the REI working group and the charge that's as presented.
Seconds.
I heard Director Saylor motion and Director Guerrero as a second.
Yes, thank you.
You know, thank you for that discussion. I really appreciate it, Director Frost. And I think that your points will not be lost, because that's a tenet of who we are, is equality. Lose that conversation or that discussion in the midst of this working group. So with that, I see no other hands up, and we'll go ahead and move for a roll call vote.
Well, excuse me, Chris Branscombe here. I believe Director Frost was asking for a friendly amendment to the charge. Should that be considered separately or not?
Well, she was, and I don't know if we've got a second on that. So she did ask for that. That is correct, Director Branscombe.
Yeah, I'd second a friendly amendment. I think it's benign and injects a concept that is healthy and co-equal to the equity considerations.
All right, thank you. So we have a friendly amendment to add the concept of equality in the working group. And to your point, Director Branscombe, there's no reason why that could not be included. And what we could do is go ahead and approve this and ask staff to come back with the working group and add a statement there. Would that work for folks?
I would like to see the amendment approved with the amendment with equality included in the working structure of the group.
Do you have a suggestion about what to be placed in there, Director Frost?
Yeah, you could just say under the first bullet point, it says supporting implementation of the framework for advancing racial equity. You could just say support understanding current law and implementation of the framework for racial equity. And then you could, that would include all of it without even saying the word equality, because equality is in the law. And under the fourth bullet, you could say exploring exploring current law data to better understand how blah, blah, blah. So I think what I'm saying is we have a structure in place that over 100 years or, over time, great people have used that law to advance equality and equity, equal treatment under the law. Our Black people know all about it. They're the heroes of our time. So I think those two things would include equity just by saying exploring current law and data to better understand, and then supporting supporting the understanding of the current law, or and implementation of a framework for advancing equity. I don't know, maybe our Kirk can word it better than I can, but I think what I'm trying to say is let's take into account equality, which is the framework. It is the foundation. It is described as our inalienable right of the people who actually created the whole, the whole structure of our government and the foundation of who we are. It is not something that can be taken away. It belongs to us without the law. It is our constitutional, foundation. So.
Thank you, Director Frost. Before we've got a couple of questions, but James, as you were tracking that, do you want to follow up on a comment?
I do, Chair Gore and Director Frost. I appreciate the issue you're raising here, but I do want for all the board members just to weigh in on this, given how much work the working group has put in. And it may sound like it's not a big deal. Equity, equality, actually both are important concepts. This is the work around the race, equity, and inclusion working group. And that concept of equity drives all of this. And let me give you, just from a transportation perspective, my something I was just thinking of in terms of why is it different? I used to work down in the Bay Area for a transportation planning agency. We had the community of West Oakland. lower income, community of color, historically, and they had equality of opportunity to come to our planning agency and get a transportation grant, but they never applied. So they had equality of opportunity. No grants ever came in. We didn't hear from them. Why? They were busy. They worked multiple jobs. We didn't hold the hearings at the right time for them to show up. And what we did was we did actually a planning program to actually go out to the communities on their schedules, to listen to them as the framework is suggesting we do. And we learned they had huge transportation challenges. That's equity. Equity is being proactive. Equity is not saying, well, they didn't show up, they don't get anything. And that concept of equity, and I really want to put my thumb on the scale on this one, is critical for this work. And I know we're talking about words and definitions, but as you all know, they matter. And the work of this working group from last year, carried into this year, that concept is critical.
Chairman Gore, if I may.
Sorry, I don't know who's speaking. Branscombe, yes. And then we've got a couple other folks who have raised their hand, but go ahead, Director Branscombe.
Thank you. Director Corliss's comments are perfect. I would have voted for the charge as originally drafted. That said, the arguments for including equality do not undermine the charge. I do not think they undermine the charge, and I think it would be wonderful if we could include that and have a unanimous vote in favor, whereas perhaps we would not have a unanimous vote in favor without the inclusion of the equality concept in the charge. I would love to be part of a board that had that unanimous vote, and I don't think the equality inclusion undermines the thrust or undermines the goals that Director Corliss so perfectly stated. Thank you.
Director Branscombe, if I may, I want to be clear. I want to make sure I've been clear. I believe they do. I believe it does undermine. That was my point, is we have to go beyond just having a public hearing for everybody, equality of opportunity, to equity, to be proactive. And while so I just want to be very clear. I do actually think this actually undermines the work that's been done and the intention of the work ahead.
Understood.
Thank you. Let's see, Director Chenier.
Yeah.
Director Guerrero.
I just want to re-emphasize my point. I think I agree with Director Corliss, Executive Director Corliss, whatever your title is, James. I think he was eloquent about it, and very articulate, that it does make a huge difference. And again, just emphasizing, we need to keep focused on what the issue is here. And the issue here is inequality of opportunity and access, and equity means that focus is where we can do something about it. I do just want to ask a procedural question, if I can. Mr. Saylor had made a motion that was seconded. If Supervisor Frost is asking for a friendly amendment, I would expect to hear back from Mr. Saylor one way or another. If she wants to make a substitute motion with a second, then we should vote on that. But I think that Mr. Saylor needs to respond to the request for a friendly amendment, if that's what it is.
Thank you, Director Chenier. So I'll go ahead and allow Director Saylor to speak, since he actually did raise his hand earlier.
Thank you, Chair Gore. I don't accept a friendly amendment. It's not consistent with the thrust of this. I think that equity is the issue. I think that absence of opportunity is exactly what we're talking about. I think that the strand of American history over the past 250 years or 400 years can be interpreted by any of us in interesting ways. But for me, I think the charge is very thoughtful. I think it addresses the efforts that we had last year. It speaks to the moment. It is appropriate for us to charge this working group as stated in the chart. So I don't accept the amendment, and frankly, I'd like to move to a vote.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to clarify with our county council, just to make sure I'm doing this appropriately. And I know that we still have a couple of comments. So Director Guerrero, Frost, Stollard, and then I wanted, so Director Guerrero, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Mr. Corliss's comments entirely. Who have experienced racial inequity, even with the means to be able to find housing or to purchase a car. So very basic necessities and denied. And so I don't find equality in the law today and would like to pursue racial equity instead. And so I strongly believe.
Oh, no.
Frost, please.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank James for clarifying his position. I do want to make some comments regarding the situation with the transportation agency. I could see a situation where there would be a very poor individual who worked nights and weekends for 2 years to figure out how to get through the schooling or certification, or to save the money for something, to apply for something. And where they did take the time to meet the application on time, and then someone, just because of their color or because they didn't show up on time, because they made less money or because their station in life was lower, they actually were put in ahead of that person who actually worked really hard. That is equity. That's equalizing the playing field, or lowering someone else so someone else can rise. But when you lower someone, it doesn't rise the other person. It only lowers everyone to their level. And so, you know, equality is equal opportunity. It's not equal results. And so there is a difference between equality and equity. I think equity and inclusion is really important, but I don't think you can leave out the conversation about equality out of this conversation and have it turn out as well as it can. And also at the same time protect our constitutional rights under the law. And at the same time, I want to go ahead and offer, I do want to make a sub motion to include verbiage that would include equality. It doesn't have to be the word equality. It can be, as I described, under current law, or, you know, by adding that conversation of current law in that conversation, make sure that the conversation encompasses the whole picture, which is more complex than I think a lot of people realize, and would be worth exploring and understanding before we make policy moving forward without understanding the whole issue. So I want to go ahead and make that motion to include, you know, understanding the current law and supporting implementation of framework for advancing racial equity, so that equality is included in the conversation. And I hope someone will second my motion.
Thank you, Director Frost. Kirk, would you help me on procedures here? I don't know where you are, so I can't see you.
I'm here.
All right, can you help me out on procedures?
So we have a motion and a second. Director Frost asked for a friendly amendment to the motion, which was rejected by the maker of the motion. So the opportunity is for a member of the board to make a substitute motion. Director Frost's amendment, there needs to be a little clarity on the language, but Director Frost has made a substitute motion asking for a change to the charge. I assume that based upon the various comments, I think Director Frost is asking for the language "an understanding of the law" and be inserted after supporting in the first bullet of activities, and inserting the same language after exploring in the fourth bullet of activities. So if Director Frost will confirm that, that would be the content of the motion. What we're looking for now is whether there is a second to that motion, and if there is, there will be a vote on the substitute motion, Director Frost motion first.
Thank you very much. So then I will go ahead and see if there is a second to Supervisor Frost or Director Frost's.
Do you want me to clarify it, Bonnie, again?
Do you have it, Kirk, or do you need to have Director Frost clarify?
Well, certainly, Director Frost, did I characterize what you'd like to see in the language?
I think you did under the first bullet, supporting the understanding of current law and the implementation of the framework for advancing racial equity, et cetera. And then under the fourth bullet, exploring current law, data, current law and data to better understand how and consider potential recommendations.
Thank you. All right. So with that substitute motion, do we have a second to that substitute motion?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Director Sander and Director Stollard. I'll let you make some comments and then we'll take a vote on that.
Am I up?
Yes, Director Sander.
You know, this is as our work here at this board and on this topic has mentioned before, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be difficult. And so I want to encourage my colleagues here to be willing to take on that difficulty head on, as opposed to look for easy solutions. And I need to frame a little bit about where I'm coming from. So, I mean, I grew up in a child of privilege. There's no question about that. And it wasn't probably until college that I had a decent understanding of the way other people lived and the challenges they faced. And this was in St. Louis, was a pretty racially polarized place where I went to college. I, from that point on, have worked on causes of equity, given opportunities to do so in a variety of organizations, including this one, where not too many years ago, I'm not sure if James was here or if it was Mike, somewhere around that transition period, we had an application from, I believe it was North Sacramento, and they were seeking a small amount of money to do something unusual, and had very eloquent voices behind their application, but were rejected based on technicality. They had no support from their city or very little support from the city. I think it was the city of Sacramento, I'm not sure. Details are a little fuzzy because it's been years. But I made a statement at that time saying that we had a serious problem at SACOG dealing with equity. And the challenge was that those sorts of marginalized communities were being run over for lack of the sort of technical support that were only available in wealthier communities. And I represent one of those marginalized communities. The city of Rancho Cordova, 20 years ago, was a significantly marginalized community, overlooked, underserved. It was a dumping ground for things that the county didn't want elsewhere. I'll take that as a comment. We have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps and taken on those challenges, but those sorts of inequities still remain. You know, trying to fund infill projects along Folsom Boulevard is structurally difficult. Trying to ensure that our kids get a fair education in our half of the school district, nearly impossible, given the parameters around it. So I am extremely familiar with these issues. For a privileged white guy, I am familiar with these issues on an operational basis for 20 years now in my community, and before that in lots of organizations. But I have also seen an awful lot of mess around this topic in this organization and elsewhere. And you know, I served on the National Civic League, which is the All-America City organization, the originator of community engagement, and also probably the leading voice in the nation for racial equity work. And I've seen that develop. It started when I was board chair of that organization, that national organization. And I've seen a lot of pain and difficulty in dealing with it. And what I'm witnessing here on this board this morning is some of that. So we have one board member expressing, or more than one, expressing the request that equality be included somewhere in the charge, that the law as it currently is be examined. And I'm seeing other members of the board react in a knee-jerk sort of a way, saying, oh, no, we don't want that word. That's a bad word. Equality is a bad word. I would suggest to you that excluding that word is not a great way of beginning this discussion. I think if you want to be truly inclusive and bring people along, then you can't start out with a cancel culture like attack on a word. That's not how we move people together towards a goal. That's how you build walls and how you create exclusion and how you end up canceling grants from people because they didn't have the staff work to make it as equal as other grant applications in the region. So I just want to say, this is going to be hard work. And if we don't stick together, it's not going to work.
Thank you, Director Sander, and Director Stoller, please.
I agree with many things I have heard. This is a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation we have to have and keep having. And I completely understand the thought, the word equality. It's a very appealing word. But equality basically, and the policies we've had have gotten us to where we are, which isn't where we need to be. So, it's hard to vote against equality, but the fact is we need to be doing leg up things to help people who have not had equal opportunity. I'm just going to talk about my own life for a minute, dear colleagues. My grandfather came to this country as an immigrant from England. He got into a union as a conductor in the Bay Area, worked on a train, so he had a good union job. He was able to afford a house because he could afford a house at a time Black people in his part of Oakland couldn't buy a house. And when he died, he owned that house and he left it free and clear to my dad. My dad also went to work for a union. I don't ever remember seeing a Black or an Asian sheet metal worker. All the time I knew my dad and all the people he worked with. He also was able to buy a home. And when he passed away, he was able to leave that to my sisters and me. So, I'm not, quote unquote, a self-made man. I step on shoulders that had economic capacity and opportunity for at least 2 generations. I've read about people like Ginger Rutland, who was an editorial writer for The Bee. Her dad came to Sacramento with the United States Air Force. He couldn't buy a home anywhere because he was Black. He had to have a white friend negotiate the deal, and then her dad slipped in at the title company, I guess, or whatever it was at the time. And then I just saw a program on PBS about Black farmers in America who were not given any federal Department of Agricultural assistance for their farming operations, and all the money went to white farmers. So what I'm saying is, this is systemic racism that goes on from generation to generation. I don't want to see, I don't want to see people disadvantaged as we try to create disadvantages, but at some point in time, it becomes necessary if we really do want equality. In other words, some people are not at the starting line, they're behind the starting line. And somehow we have to get them up and get them beyond with the rest of us. So, and this isn't liberalism, this isn't conservatism. To me, this is fairness, equity. And if we want to move our country forward, we have to get over it. It just kills me that Asians are being harassed on the streets of my community and other communities in this country. It is just wrong. And we have to say no more, it's wrong. And we have to make sure that everybody is treated fairly. But it's not going to start with just talking about equality. That's what we've been talking about for decades, and it isn't doing the job. So I'm not going to support the substitute. I'm going to support the main motion. And I hope we get to it. And if we have to have a divided vote, folks, that's part of democracy too. Everything on the national stage right now is 50-50, and Kamala Harris makes the decision. I'm sorry, that's where we are. And hopefully we'll all stay tight together as we try to move through these shores. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stollard. And challenging discussion, important discussions, and I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments, Director Sanders' comment. So let's go ahead and take a vote on the substitute motion, please. We'll do a roll call on that. And clerk, if you would do that, please, and everyone have your microphones ready to respond. Thank you.
Yes, for the substitute motion, Directors Baines,
Aye.
Bernasconi,
Aye.
Bradford.
Aye.
Sorry to clarify, Bradford, it was an aye.
Yes, an aye.
Thank you. Branscombe,
Aye.
Bulahan. I believe she's still having tech issues. I'm just going to make sure I don't have a chat from her. Okay, I'll come back to that. And then Burris sent me a chat that she votes yes, she's having some mic issues. Clark Kretz,
Aye.
Desmond,
Aye.
Ferricks,
No.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
No.
Gog,
No.
Gore. Chair Gore, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Guerrero,
No.
Harris,
No.
Vice Chair Jennings,
No.
Joyner, still absent. Kennedy,
No.
Kozlowski. He is a yes on submotion. He just sent me a chat. Lozano,
Aye.
Middleton,
No.
New,
No.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
No.
Saylor,
No.
Chenier,
No.
Spokley,
Yes.
Stallard, Director Stallard, will you indicate your vote for this motion?
No.
Thank you. Soon,
No.
Thomas,
Yes.
and West.
No.
Okay,
Thank you. We'll let you.
the motion fails.
All right, thank you. So the motion fails, so we will then go back to the original motion by Director Saylor and second by Director Guerrero on the original wording of the framework or the charge for the working group.
Pardon me, what was the vote? What was the count?
I can share the screen if that's helpful.
Is it worth reminding the board members that to pass a motion in SACOG, it requires that the motion pass 3 tests. The first, it must receive a majority of the county representatives voting. Second, it must receive a majority of the city members voting. And third, it must receive a majority of the population of the members represented voting.
Yes, and to clarify for those 3, like Kirk referenced, it did fail for population and it failed for city.
If it fails one, it fails, correct, Kirk?
That's correct. It has to pass all 3 of those tests in order to pass a motion.
Thank you. And so I know it's a little bit confusing and we can share that again, Director Branscombe, but we're going to take the second item or the original motion. And if you would roll or call the roll, please.
Yes. Okay. Directors Baines,
Aye.
Bernasconi,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Bulahan. So hers absent. Burris just sent me a chat. Her vote is a yes. Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Desmond,
Aye.
Ferricks,
Aye.
Frost,
No.
Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Chair Gore,
Yes.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Harris,
Yes.
Jennings,
Aye.
Joyner, still absent. Kennedy. Mark is absent. And then Kozlowski said he just voted yes on this. Lozano,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
New,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
Thank you. Stallard.
Yes.
Thank you. Soon.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
West.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. And thank you for everyone who has volunteered on this working group and will continue to do this hard work as we move forward. With that, we are going to skip item 10 because we have our presenters here for item 11. So we'll move to our workshop, which is the 2021 Mega Region Working Group and Board Workshop. We're going to start with Clint Holtzen, and he's going to kick off the item, and then we'll introduce our speakers, Stacy Mortensen with the San Joaquin Valley Rail Commission, and ACE, and Rob Padgett with the Capitol Corridor. So go ahead, Clint. Thank you.
I think, James, I'll hand it off to you. I believe you're doing our introductions for our speakers.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. So I know that there has been a lot of interest really over the last 18 months in particular under the leadership of last year's chair, Lucas Frerichs, in our mega region economy. And we are kicking off, I think as many of you know, our mega region working group. We have 4 SACOG board members appointed to that working group. Chair Gore, Director Kozlowski, Director Frerichs, and Director Saylor. That working group is with San Joaquin COG and MTC in the Bay Area. And I think the timing couldn't be better because, as I've talked to many of you about, in many ways, the pandemic has elongated our economy. We are seeing people move up here. We're seeing a lot of employers in the Bay Area take a look or even begin actually chasing some of their employees up to this region. And so the question is, what are the transportation investments that can really actually more strongly tie our mega region together? And I think there is some exciting work on passenger rail that has been going on for quite some time. The Capitol Corridor, frankly, is a national success story. One of the busiest passenger rail Amtrak corridors in the country, but also the ACE trains from the Silicon Valley through the Tri-Valley in Stockton are going to be arriving in the Sacramento region within the next couple of years, and maybe even to points north, as well as the San Joaquin train. So we have 2 great presenters today. I'm going to introduce both of them quickly, and I think we're going to hear from Capitol Corridor first. And again, I want to frame this as a way to set up for the mega region working group, which those 4 board members from SACOG will be on. I want to frame this in a way that makes you all think about the increasing interdependence across our 16 counties through the Bay Area and the Central Valley and the Sacramento region, and frankly, even Northern Nevada. And I want to frame it in a way for you all to understand that as we go forward over the next 12 to 18 months, there are going to be major funding opportunities, we hope, at the state level and the federal level to invest in this passenger rail service. Rob Padgett is the managing director of the Capitol Corridor. Stacy Mortensen is executive director, San Joaquin Valley Rail Commission and ACE. We're going to bring up Rob first. I hope Rob knows that and is ready. And so
I'm ready. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Excellent.
Thanks for being patient. And we're really thrilled. And again, for board members, I know you went through a very long dialogue just now, but I hope you can give this your absolute attention, because these projects that Rob and Stacy are going to talk about, again, I think are critical to the future of our region. It isn't just about locomotives and tracks. It's about people and economy and inclusion. So take it away, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I'm Rob, and you teed it up very nicely. And you're right, there's a lot of opportunity. We're actually pretty optimistic about our future, and I'll talk about that with some of the projects in the SACOG region. I'm Rob Paget. I am the Managing Director for Capital Corridor, and I am relatively new to this position. I started July before the pandemic, and it's great to be with you today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are, and then highlight some of our riders so you have a sense of who our riders are, and then talk about some of our plans for expansion, because we really do have a lot of great stuff on our plate. Can you go to the next slide, please? So Capital Corridor is a 170-mile service. We extend from Auburn through Sacramento down to the East Bay into Silicon Valley. We are the only public transportation service that serves the entire Northern California megaregion, and we rely extensively on lots of connections with our transit partners. If you can go to the next slide, please. And we were created just about 20 years ago. Our service is having its 30th anniversary this year, but the first 10 years of that, we were managed by the state. The oversight was by the state of California. And the decision was made to push that responsibility and oversight down to a regional body that could really connect better to the needs of those customers in those regions that we serve. And you'll see on the next slide, and hold on this one, please don't change it, but you'll see on the next slide the success of that decision that was made 20 years ago. In terms of our governance structure, we have a 16-member board, which includes 6 members from the SACOG region. We have 6 members from the BART board, which are 2 each from each of those counties down in the area the Bay Area serves, and then the Santa Clara BTA. We're pretty interesting service. So Amtrak runs our service. They provide the engineers and the conductors that operate the trains, they manage the stations, and they maintain our equipment. But the equipment itself is primarily owned by the state of California. And the right-of-way is owned and dispatched by Union Pacific, with a little piece of it owned and operated by Caltrain. And then lastly, a lot of our partner cities up and down the corridor own pieces of the station. And so we help try to bring all this together and oversee the service. You can go to the next slide, please. So this will give you a sense as to the success of this decision 20 years ago. We carried almost 1.8 million passengers, up from 500,000 20 years ago in 2019 pre-pandemic. And James mentioned we were one of the fastest growing services. Actually, if you look at the last 5 years up to 2019, we were the fastest growing service in the country. And we're right behind the service in Southern California and then the Northeast Corridor in terms of total ridership. So this really is, when you look across the country, this is one of the most significant services out there. We brought in almost $38 million in 2019, and through that, we covered about 60% of our operating costs. One of the big things that we have done over the last 20 years is we've really expanded our service. We're running 30 weekday trains and 22 weekend trains pre-pandemic, and our on-time performance has been really up there again as one of the best in the country. Next slide. So a little bit about our riders. Some of you, I hope, have been on Capital Corridor, and about 70% of our riders are related in some way to work. And that might be a super commuter. It might be a person going to a conference in Sacramento. It might be a person who has an office in Sacramento and one in San Francisco, traveling between those offices. But we carry a lot of those passengers, and James alluded to this issue that we're seeing and really fits a lot of our profile, is we have a lot of people who maybe they work in the Bay Area, maybe they have a group in Santa Clara, and they go in once a week or once every couple of weeks, and they live up in Roseville or Sacramento and make that trip and are able to be productive in that trip. That's a really common passenger for us. And we think in many ways that our service is probably going to rebound faster than a lot of services given that profile. But we also carry a lot of students. So if you ever have been on the train on a Sunday night going through Davis, the train will absolutely empty. I've done it myself. And it's great to be able to drop your kids off at a station and let them get back to school. We serve UC Berkeley, but also lots of other universities up and down the corridor. And then we serve leisure travel and tourists. So we really see everybody on our corridor, and we look forward to being a part of the growth in the California economy as we rebound in the coming months. As I am an East Coaster and moved out here 3 years ago, one of the really interesting things about our service is about 10% of our riders get to our service on bikes. So that means that we have to plan for that. We have bike racks on our trains, but we also have bike lockers at our station. And in fact, when I come up to Sacramento, I bring my bike and I ride in the great bike lanes in downtown Sacramento and get to my meeting. So I'm like a lot of those passengers that are getting there through these various modes of transportation. Next slide, please. So I want to just very quickly touch on pandemic. This is kind of the scary slide that I'm sure you've seen for a lot of transit agencies. We're running at about 15% of our normal ridership right now. We are starting to bounce back slowly, but it has been quite a year. If you can go to the next slide. So we have taken the opportunity, we were really bursting at the seams pre-pandemic, and we've taken this opportunity to do a few things. One is we want to position ourselves to be able to recover quickly. So we were watching our finances. And one of the things that we did is we've accelerated the move towards California-owned equipment. We're also carefully evaluating our staffing needs. And then we've been working with Congress on support for this shortfall in funding that we have over the course of this year. We have not historically been funded with federal dollars. We've been funded with state dollars, but we are super grateful to Congress. They provided support through the CARES Act and the COVID relief bill and have set us up to be in a place where we think we can grow our service back quickly once we have the opportunity. And then on the operations side, we've done a few things. So one is we have a new Pulse schedule that's coming out on March 29th. Some of you may have seen this new schedule. This is just, Pulse is more predictable. So rather than have to memorize a complicated schedule, you kind of know when your train leaves a few minutes after the hour. The other thing that lets transit agencies do up and down the corridor is better coordinate their services with our service. And then for SACOG, one of the really big changes is that we will now have our train that comes out of Auburn. We have one a day that goes between Auburn and Sacramento. Will extend the entire length of our corridor. So you can get on in Auburn and go all the way to San Jose. And that's a big change. And we've been working closely with Placer County on that. So look for that on March 29th, and I hope some of you will take advantage of it. And then we've made lots of improvements. So we're working on our equipment where our Wi-Fi is twice as fast as it was probably last time you were on the train. And then we're doing upgrades to the equipment, like replacing the doors and doing things that we can do when we have more of our equipment parked with a reduced level of service. And then the last thing that we're working on, and more to come on this, and I'll probably be back to talk about some of this in future months. Last year, a bill was passed that gave us more freedom to work with transit agencies in partnership to fund some connections into our service. And so we're reaching out to some of our partners in the transit world to see if we can take advantage of that opportunity. Next slide, please. So I want to just touch on a few projects here. And on the next slide, I'll go into the Sac Roseville in more detail, but a couple things we're working on. The third track project in Sac Roseville, which will allow us to expand to 3 round trips daily between Roseville and Sacramento, which we're super excited about. And that's probably on the fastest track. We have a little bit of a funding shortfall in that we're going to work through. South Bay Connect, we are going to relocate our service onto a different right-of-way south of Oakland for a piece, and that's going to help improve the reliability of our service. And also, we think, open up us for more service in the future. And then lastly, it provides a much better connection to the peninsula. So we're going to have an intermodal station at Ardenwood. And so you can take the train down to Ardenwood, jump on a bus or an employer shuttle, head over to Palo Alto or other locations on the peninsula. And then the last one to mention is Link 21, which is really potentially a transformational project. And I hope you will stay engaged and keep us posted in your own, with your own ideas. This would provide a direct rail connection into the city of San Francisco. So Capital Corridor is working in partnership with BART on this project, and we're excited about that. So in addition to, these are bigger projects, but we're doing all sorts of little stuff, call it little, in partnership with Union Pacific. I just want to mention one that's active right now, and you can see the picture behind me, the Davis Station. We are right now replacing signals that were date to the 1930s, relocating those signals near the Davis Station. And we're doing that as a first step towards rebuilding the platforms at Davis Station so that we can have a center island platform that's more accessible. And so we're working with Amtrak in partnership on that. And stay tuned. I hope to be back in future meetings and talk about that project. We're really excited about it. Next slide. So, and I'll leave, this is my last slide here. I'll leave you with an update on where we are on the SAC Roseville project. We're at about 30% design. I think actually that's a little dated, but we're at 30% design on that project. We hope to be operating by 2025. We do have a little bit of a funding shortfall. And I mentioned that to say that we see tremendous opportunity at the federal level. So we have relied on great political support within the state over the past many years because there really was not a lot of funding for inner city passenger rail at the federal level. And over the past few years, there has been more and more funding given to discretionary grant programs. And we think that this particular project, the SAC Roseville project, is really teed up and would be quite competitive for those programs. The reauthorization that's in the works now is proposing much larger intercity passenger rail programs. So what we think we're going to be able to do here in California is accelerate a lot of our plans. So we've relied on state sources. A lot of these are tied into reducing greenhouse gases, but we think we can leverage those, get some federal dollars, bring those to the table, and move quickly on these projects. So look forward to working with all of you as we move forward on that, and be happy to take questions after Stacy's presentation.
Thank you so much. And coming from Roseville, go on that Capital Corridor project expansion between Placer County and Sacramento. I think we all would appreciate that. Go ahead, James. I know you want to introduce our next speaker.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, absolutely, Chair Gore. And again, as Stacy gets her slides ready here, Renee gets them ready. I've heard sometimes people talk about that third track as, wouldn't it be great if we get from Roseville to downtown Sacramento, right? And I think part of the point here is it does so much more. It does so much more than that. It is connecting our entire region and allowing Rob and his agency to run the kind of frequent and reliable service. And I just now understood the Pulse service, which anytime you don't have to look at a schedule, boy, that is in all seriousness, right? That's the kind of frequency and reliability we need. So again, delighted to present our next speaker here. You've got the A team on these two agencies, and Stacy Mortensen is the executive director, San Joaquin Valley Rail Commission. They run the Altamont Corridor Express. Again, these are really going to be two, in my mind, kind of complementary interlocking services. And Stacy's going to tell you a lot more about them, but I do think that the future is very bright and exciting, and it's closer than I think we imagined, even despite the pandemic and the hit on ridership. So Stacy, take it away.
Well, good morning. Thank you, James. Good morning, members of the board. I go back a little further than Rob does, and I'm not sure, is my video on?
Yep, you're good. We can see you.
So I go back to the era of Isla Collin when she was an advisory member over the San Joaquin service, and she advised Caltrans. And I know she went on to play a role for Capital Corridor, but that dates me in terms of rail involvement back to the mid 1990s. So I have a little bit more gray hair than Rob does. Next slide. speaking of the whole Northern California network, here is just a snapshot. And in the gold, you see the planned high-speed rail program. So I just always want to keep that in context in terms of how we're connecting the whole northern area down to Merced. But this shows you how both Capitol Corridor, which is in the blue up at the top of the screen, the San Joaquins, which are in the light green, and then the initial A service and expanded A service in purple, how, as Jim said, those all do really interconnect in the context of the bigger Northern California mega region. Next slide. So we dialed down a little further. I usually go and talk about our Valley Rail program, and what that is the existing A service, Stockton to Sacramento, and I'll dive into that in a minute. But in combination with this new expansion down to Merced, as you see in the sort of lavender color, and then the shared expansion from Stockton up to Natomas. And so each of those circles you see is a new station facility along this new route. Next slide. San Joaquin, Rob gave you the overview of the capitals. We're a bit longer corridor where we run the spine. And as we come up from the valley into the northern region, we split off, and some trains go to Sacramento and some trains go to Oakland. We've got 18 stations, and it's a lot of territory to cover. And we're carrying about 1.1 million passengers a year pre-COVID. Next slide. This is a snapshot of the governance. We have a representative from each of the counties that you see there. Kern County in the beginning decided not to join. They felt an affinity to the LA region as opposed to the Valley, which, okay. But we have a really strong coalition through the Valley and two Bay Area counties in terms of overseeing the service. I might mention that Elk Grove Council member Pat Hume is currently the chair of the Joint Powers Authority that oversees San Joaquin's. Next slide. And then back out to the macro view, our San Joaquin agency is also responsible for an expansive throughway bus network. And these take people to the far reaches of the state. This starts to touch on the real equity issue. Not everyone has access to the trunk line rail services, but a lot of people need to get there. And so the throughway bus network, you'll see a little bit later, is a huge portion of our operating budget, but we do it so that we can connect people into areas that likely won't have rail service for a while. It's also our way to connect down to Southern California to the Pacific Surfliners that Rob mentioned. They're in the dark blue there down at the bottom. And then just for grins, the Brightline service, or I guess they've changed their name again, but the service from Victorville to Vegas, the private service, they're shown there in the magenta going out of the state. And they're still chugging along, I guess I would say. Next slide. So a bit about our riders. You can see on the screen our top destinations, the ridership diversity, the income levels, the trip purpose, almost completely opposite of capitals. We're really connecting family and more leisure than business travel. And we've dabbled a little bit to see what kind of service schedules might appeal to the business travel. But we're really learning this spine sort of service is really for purposes other than going to work. Not to say it can't expand to that, because I think our expansion will help, but this is what the service is today. And in terms of the equity issue, we have had some struggle, and Rob has helped me with this a lot. Amtrak stopped taking cash. And while for ACE and the capitals, we might be able to navigate that a bit better, we cannot do that on the San Joaquins. We have so many cash purchases. I needed Rob's help and horsepower to argue with me to Amtrak that we need to bring back cash sales. And so I think we will be seeing that in the next couple of weeks. But it's just an area where we have to constantly remind people that not everyone has a credit card that they can tap on and tap off. And maybe those that do can't use that for travel. So something we really have in mind as we look at our service. Our budget's a little bit bigger than the capitals, a lot bigger, but it also includes $20 million for that throughway bus network. So you see there, it's about $84 million a year. And then our average trip length is 138 miles. Just by comparison, the ACE average trip length is about 54. And 55% of the riders use that throughway bus network. So it's very, very critical. On the ACE system, we have a very extensive shuttle network in the Tri-Valley. They take people up to Bishop Ranch, Hacienda Business Park, BART, and then a big network in Silicon Valley. And about 50% of the ACE riders use the shuttle. So on an inner city route, for 55% to use the bus service, that just shows it's a critical part of the network. Next slide. This is an overview of our current ACE trunk line. It's in the format of a BART map, for those of you familiar with that. 85-mile service starts in Stockton, as you see, runs through the Tri-Valley and then down into Silicon Valley. It's funded all by local sales tax and fares. So San Joaquin, Alameda, Santa Clara, we all have sales taxes that contribute to the needed subsidy. ACE has been around 22 years. Pre-COVID, we had about 3 of our 4 trains carrying 1,200 people each way. That is very crowded. Our lowest ridership train had 800 people. It's just a function of the fact we don't have a lot of frequencies like Capitals or BART or Caltrain. So we have to put a lot of people on a particular train, but the expansion will help that. Next slide. So this is an overview of the northern part of our expansion. It will bring some ACE trains from starting in Stockton. We will back them up to start in Natomas. And then in the future, it will have some trains coming up from Ceres and Merced as well. It's focused on an eastern rail line. It's not the 99 corridor. That corridor was not going to be available for healthy rail expansion. This corridor is. We can put many more trains. We can run those trains at higher speeds in the open areas. And it lets us connect in the Natomas area with a simple shuttle over to the airport. And then something I have thought about for probably a decade, this line allows us to work with Butte CAG and then SACOG on expansion further to the north. It has always been an interest of mine. I see that that area is underserved, and this is the rail line that makes that happen. And we've had some discussions with Union Pacific, and because of the process we've worked with them over the years and the trust that we've built, I think they're ready to at least have some conversations with us about that northern territory. So that's really exciting for areas that haven't had much hope of rail service for quite a long time. Next slide. So one of the projects that we worked with the railroad to unlock this capacity, it's something called the Stockton Diamond grade separation. You see there in plan view, those are 2 major railroads, Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Union Pacific crossing at grade in the downtown Stockton area. It may not look like much from this photo, but it is one of the most serious choke points for freight, bicyclists, motorists, emergency responders, pedestrians, businesses. It is just a horrible bottleneck. So next slide will show what our planned solution is here. We are working to elevate the Union Pacific corridor up and over the BNSF. And so that will allow trains to move freely through, short line trains, freight trains, passenger trains, Amtrak and commuter. And so this will unblock the community. There's actually a train sitting up to the north, to the left, where you see blocking all the streets, and there's an educational campus and a post office, and they're all blocked by that train that's sitting there. So we really see this not only unlocking things in the Stockton area, but it's really the ticket that lets us get more trains up and down the whole spine in the valley up north of Sacramento. Next slide. And then just another look at how interconnected things are in Northern California. And I will say, between Capitol Corridor and San Joaquin's and ACE, we are working together on sharing our strengths. So Capitol Corridor has the technology strengths, Wi-Fi, changeable message signs. They're really top notch in that regard. And so we are letting them do that work for us on ACE and San Joaquin's. But then again, for ACE, we have a maintenance facility in Stockton for locomotives and rail cars. And so we're able to do some additional work to help keep our fleet in better running order and more reliable if we push some of that work out to the Stockton area. So there's ways that we're combining our talents to really integrate what's going on in Northern California. Next slide. When we look at this in context of the first piece of the high-speed rail segment, when we really have the spigot open, so to speak, we really see a lot of benefits in terms of things that are really important. Getting more people on the trains and off the highways, helping contribute to air quality elements that can improve, especially the air in the Bay Area and the Central Valley. Those basins really struggle. So anything anyone can do is a help. And then a lot of economic activity is generated by the synergies of these systems working together. Next slide. I'll go through these really quickly. For the here and now, we have some exciting new equipment. Capital Corridor has these as well. This is the new Charger locomotive. It's faster, cleaner, stronger, prettier than the old locomotives. Next slide. And this is one pulling, there's actually one working locomotive on this slide. The other one is there as a backup, but this is pulling 10 ACE cars over the Altamont Pass. So and the Altamont Pass is a really significant grade. So the fact that we can maintain schedule on that is really a testament to this new high quality locomotive. And then next slide. The state of California also went into a joint purchase of rail cars with the state of Illinois. And so there are going to be 49 rail cars available on the San Joaquins. They have this nice new interior, very comfortable ride. It's modeled after the Brightline service in Florida, which is extremely popular with the passengers for the amenities on board.
Sacramento.
Next slide.
Oh, Sacramento. Oh.
So here we are. We've got about $1.3 billion in hand to deal with this segment from Natomas down to Merced. We are mostly funded for the whole northern part. There's one area that has come up since our grant application, and Rob actually touched on it. Union Pacific has a new requirement that center platforms are built instead of the typical one on the side. You park your car in the lot and you walk over, the platform's right there and you board the train. The new requirement is that the platform is in the center, so there's tracks on either side of it. What that requires, though, is a pedestrian overcrossing or a tunnel undercrossing. And so that's a bit of a game changer for those stations. So we are still on the hunt to piece in that last bit of funding for that new center platform design. It also entails elevators for the areas that have to go up and over. That is not something I've wanted to tackle in my 30 years, but it's never too late to learn something new. So we will be looking at elevator issues and working with our communities on that, because we've got to have really good access for everyone that wants to ride the train. And then you see there, we've got some additional cars and locomotives on order. These are more ACE style, and some dates there for our major project improvements, but we will be in construction on stations and track work and bridges starting less than a year from now in early 2022. Next slide. So just want to say that it has been great working with Rob and having James there at SACOG with his vision. We've really benefited from that and appreciate the time to be able to talk with you today. And like Rob, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stacy. It's really exciting to see the plans that are coming. And as many people commute, it's just very exciting. So with that, do we have questions from any of our directors for either of our speakers? Director Frost.
First, I want to thank you for sharing about all of your exciting, or I guess our exciting plans in California. Rob, you mentioned in your presentation that the net negative or the net positive is 66%. So I'm assuming that means that the fares cover about 66% of the cost of the ongoing maintenance and the ongoing rail, all the costs. Okay. The
Right,
question
that's correct. It was 60% of the operating cost. That's correct.
60%. Sorry, I'm a little bit dyslexic sometimes and I struggle with it, but I try hard. The question I have is, I know that, you know, those costs ultimately will need to be covered by the jurisdictions as in a shared way, I'm assuming. And when do those costs kick in? And do we have any idea of what that means in dollars for our local jurisdictions as far as, I mean, is it millions or, you know?
Sure. Yeah, and I can answer. So our funding source is a state funding source. So the San Joaquin's, our service, and
I don't know if you can hear me and maybe mute and unmute yourself again. It's very garbled.
Yeah.
Okay, try.
Struggling with.
Is that any better, James?
No.
Fortunately, it's not better.
I wonder what's going on. Okay, is that any better? Still garbled?
No, it's bad. Yeah, unfortunately.
You know, can I hang up and come back?
You do sound like you're part of a Star Wars movie, but I'm not sure that's the effect you were going for.
Maybe log out and log back in.
Yeah, I'll hang up and come back. How about that?
Please, thank you. And in the meantime, are there any other questions for our panelists? All right, and I think both of you, had mentioned that there's probably some opportunity right now from the federal government to get additional funds for rail. And I think that we would all probably advocate for that. Stacy, I'm sure there's opportunity for you if there's ways that we can advocate, especially for these areas that directly affect our jurisdictions, right? For, you know, rail going up to Natomas would be a huge benefit. But I think that we'd all be interested in finding out how we can advocate to assist our jurisdictions. I'm Director Saylor, and then hopefully we'll have Rob back on. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you, Chair Gore. I just want to comment. I think it's clear enough, but it's probably worth just explicitly stating that these agencies that provide intercity passenger rail, they're comprised of us. Several members of this board are also members of the CCJPA Board of Directors. And when we think about linking our mega region in the work that we are continuing this year with Chair Gore's leadership, we will have opportunities to piggyback on the efforts that Mr. Padgett and Ms. Mortensen have identified as the initiatives that they're pursuing. I think this is really one of the key vehicles for connecting our larger region from the Bay Area to Reno. And this is a very important work that they're doing, and the opportunity for smooth transit connections throughout our region on rail and otherwise is really important for the SACOG board to be aware of. So I appreciate this presentation today.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Appreciate that.
And can you all hear me better now?
Yes, much better. So
okay.
The question. Thank you.
It's amazing what hanging up and starting again will do. And thanks to Director Saylor, and Director Saylor is our chair. He just began his 2-year term, and we very much appreciate all of his leadership. And I'll go back to that question about funding. So our funding comes from state sources. The San Joaquin service, our service, and the service down in the Los Angeles, San Diego area is all funded through a state source. And so we work really closely together. Our subsidy from the state was about $27 million planned in 2020, but that was blown up this year. And fortunately, the congressional support is covering much of the revenue gap that we have this year, but we are working really carefully to to make sure that we stay on solid footing. So all three of the agencies work closely together. We have that natural tension over how high are your fares versus the subsidies, and that's always a point of discussion. But as Stacy said, what we're trying to do is manage the service really carefully, do things, make capital improvements that improve our reliability, that brings people onto our trains. That means we need that we can carry more people for the same subsidy. And our service at Capital Corridor, we've actually kept the subsidy flat for many, many years, and at the same time carried more and more passengers. So our overall ratio of operating costs covered by fares has been going up. And then while I've got the floor, I forgot to mention, but I have to mention it since I'm on the SACOG meeting. Sacramento Station today, during pandemic times, 60% of our riders get on or off at Sacramento Station. The SACOG region is the heart of Capital Corridor in every way. And so I'm super excited to be here and talk to you today.
Thank you, Robin. Really good to know how much ridership comes out of the Sacramento area. Any other questions?
If you don't mind, Stacy, I was just wondering, can you give us an update of when we could see a service truly get to Sacramento and North Sacramento and Natomas?
Our target right now is to take one of the existing ACE trains and back it up to start it out of Natomas by the end of 2023. That would be paired with a train that's coming out of Ceres directly and over to San Jose as well. Those two phases are piggybacked.
And that's got a station Midtown and
Yes.
North Sacramento.
Yes. We are environmentally cleared for that segment. We did, based on community request, pull the Elk Grove station, and we've now got that in its own environmental process to look at a more suitable station, which I'm excited about. The community is very vested in really trying to find a spot. And as you may know, Elk Grove has had several locations over the years, but we want it to work. And we want it to work in the larger regional context too. So I think this effort right now lets us do that.
Great. Well, thank you, Stacy. 2023 is actually
corner.
It used to seem like a long time away, but it's coming soon, which I think would be a wonderful benefit for the entire region. Rob, Stacy, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I just think it's great that we have a mega region that's working on transportation issues, working together with the other jurisdictions, just so very important as we work to move people between regions to sort of reduce the traffic congestion and provide accessibility when it comes to transportation. So with that, we are not going to take the number 10 item, which is the SACOG housing initiative, the Mind the Gap update. So take a look at that. We might come back to that in April. And with that, we are going to move to reports. I don't have anything to share other than what I shared earlier this morning. So we'll move on to item 13, which is board members' reports. Any board member have anything that you would like to share with the rest of our directors? Director Sander.
Hey, board members. I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but I serve again on the National League of Cities Board of Directors, and I am chair of their TIS committee, which is Transportation and Infrastructure Services. So this is a reauthorization year at the federal level, and the committee I chair, the policy committee I chair for the board at the National League of Cities, is involved heavily in working with Congress in trying to write specific terms of that reauthorization. So if you or your public works directors have comments for me about existing federal programs and alterations or changes that you would like to see, doesn't matter how detailed, we would like to gather those in. Send them to me. I will send them on to my committee staff. We have established a series of meetings with Secretary Pete. He's not Mayor Pete anymore. Now he's Secretary Pete in the Department of Transportation. I've met with him a couple of times. I will continue to meet with him probably every other week or once a month, something like some sort of schedule like that and talk about specifically transportation and cities. As a former mayor, he's very dialed in to where we are. The first big feedback I'll give you from those conversations is he is quite focused on Vision Zero. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that initiative. Some of us are probably a little familiar. I think only the city of Sacramento in our region has a full Vision Zero plan, although there's about 3 other jurisdictions, including Rancho Cordova, that have started on that route to getting a Vision Zero plan. Vision Zero is about having a vision of 0 transportation related deaths in the future and planning for it and trying to implement a strategy towards eliminating transportation related deaths, whether that be pedestrians, cyclists, horseback riders, I suppose, or passengers in automobiles. So he's very focused on those goals. My feeling is that you're going to see Department of Transportation internal policies and how they score things, maybe shift towards Vision Zero and safety as a whole. But I just wanted to offer up, the ability to collect any comments you may have. I've already gotten some from James and from SACOG staff, but I'm certainly available to hear any of your comments and try to pass those on as part of the National League of Cities work with the Department of Transportation and the leadership of Congress. Oh, and I should note, as a good NLC board member, that action last week, oh gosh, I always get the legislation, Save America, Rescue America Plan Act. That is unprecedented, obviously, in volume and scope for a mechanism of funding cities directly from the federal government. I don't think anything's been attempted on this scale, probably not even on this scale, since maybe Nixon was in office, and he initiated a series of programs designed to fund local city governments directly and work around governors and other levels of bureaucracy. So it's an interesting act last week. Some of us, may have concerns about the fiscal status of our federal government. Are we spending our grandchildren's resources? I know my city has not been particularly fiscally impacted by the pandemic. We actually have seen a boost in revenue, not a decline. So, it affects all of us differently, I suppose. We can have varying opinions on that. But the next bill that's coming, I'm told in conversations yesterday, is even larger. They're talking about an infrastructure bill that wouldn't be 1.9 trillion, but perhaps 3 trillion in infrastructure. I don't even know if that's manageable or can be accomplished, not on the spending end. I mean, if you're willing to do unlimited debt, then I guess you can spend it. The financial markets can absorb the debt, but are we able to implement that much? That could be a serious concern for us going forward. Is the price of asphalt going to quadruple and it actually doesn't accomplish that much? You'd hate to see those sorts of outcomes. But anyway, there's a lot going on. And I hope James and Bonnie, that we can sort of keep an eye on that ball as a region to be sure we're playing there where we should. I'm sorry that was a long announcement, but thank you.
No, appreciate it. And I know that the jurisdictions appreciate the direct allocation instead of having it go through the state first. So we like that. Director Thomas and then Director Frericks.
I know we're running short on time today, but I had to give a little shout out for a success story in El Dorado County following our discussion this morning on equity. And I don't know if some of your jurisdictions are having trouble vaccinating some of our population. We were having trouble reaching our agricultural workers. They were having a terrible time signing up through the My Turn, and it was causing them just to be left out of the vaccination process in El Dorado County. And so one of our local pharmacies was authorized by the state to do vaccines. And so working with our EOC, who provided the allocation, we worked with our local pharmacy, our agricultural leaders who coordinated the vaccination event with their farm workers. We held it at a local farm that everyone's familiar with. And we partnered with our local independent hospital, as well as our fire department who provided fire personnel. And Director Saragosa was a part of that day as well. And it was a huge success. We vaccinated over 250 farm workers that day and have a follow-up for the next. So if anyone is having trouble reaching that population, their jurisdictions, working with your independent pharmacies and through your EOC, it worked really well to reduce some of the barriers to access to service. So just wanted to offer that up.
Thank you, Director Thomas. It is amazing what can happen when we work with private-public partnerships, volunteers, etc. Director Frericks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Madam Chair. Just two quick things. I just appreciate Director Sanders' comments a few minutes ago and just wanted to ask more specifically about just sort of, yeah, I know it's going to be an ongoing sort of series of conversations and with the secretary, but you have a timeline associated with when we need to get you feedback, right, for potential program changes. So that was a question. And then just to very quickly, Supervisor Thomas's comments, I would just say, if everybody was receiving a Rainbow Orchards apple cider donut as a gift for receiving the vaccination, everybody would be getting a vaccination. So thank you for your work up there. Appreciate it.
That's absolutely right about the donuts. I think that's the key. Get those comments to me within 3 weeks. I think in the middle of April, we're having the big sort of bring all ideas together for the House Committee.
Great, thanks so much.
About
Appreciate
3 weeks before our next meeting.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And it looks like I have no other comments from directors, so we'll move to our executive director report. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Chair Gore. I will also just add on to Director Sanders' update that in addition to all of this flurry of activity on the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure bill, a possible transportation bill, is also the possible return of earmark projects. And as Director Sanders and I have gone back and forth on, I'm not sure that I am a fan of that or what it means, but it might be reality. The term feeding frenzy comes to mind. So stay tuned on that one as well. Two quick things. You have in my executive director report a couple of notes on this. We are making, fingers crossed, great progress on Green Means Go. We have a bill, Assembly Bill 1209. We will be in front of the Assembly Transportation Committee, the Assembly Housing Committee, and you got an email from me on this. If you remember, all 28 of the SACOG cities and counties support this program. 23 of the 28 have green zones identified, and we're hoping for a few more to come in. But please do, if you can just forward that to your city manager, your county exec, or your ledge affairs folks. Should not be too hard, I hope, to get those support letters in. But the more we get in before that first hearing, likely the first full week of April, the better off we'll be. And then also another to-do item, another ask of all of you, which you'll hear more about, by the way, at a lunch, April 1st, between our Transportation and Land Use Committees, is our Regional Parks and Trails Plan. You've heard a little bit about this. If you're a veteran, you heard a lot about it last year. We are now entering the engagement phase on this Trails Plan, and I think it's really exciting. This is a great example of where we would have just gone out and done our usual public outreach, and we had to really rethink, the SACOG staff had to rethink how to do this in a pandemic, and they need your help. That email went out. I think Renee Garcia sent it on my behalf, both in terms of the community-based organizations, getting back to our equity conversation. You have a list of community-based organizations. Please, for your districts, nobody knows these folks better than you. Have a look. We want to make sure we have names and organizations and that we're hitting everybody we can hit, number one. And then secondly, our staff, of course, has some awesome ways for you to put things in newsletters, social media, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. We want to get the word out. We're doing that through April 30th. And this, again, is really making sure that we try hard to get a lot of public input and engagement. Yes, largely in a virtual setting, but our staff has actually been working in some vaccine lines, handing out paper flyers with some of our community-based organizations. So there's a hybrid approach here, but this plan is really exciting. I know many of you have weighed in on this and you're watching it, and we'll be back April 1st to give you a little bit more of an update on that lunch session. And you're going to hear a lot more about this in the months ahead. So, and yes, somebody just said we need a TikTok SACOG platform as well. I'm sure we're on that. Okay, that is my update. I'm happy to answer any questions or offline follow up with any of those items. Again, please do check your email. You've gotten a lot of email from me in the last week, and every single one is important. I just can assure you.
Thank you, James. Appreciate that. So with that, we will wrap up today's board meeting. We have our next board board meeting on Thursday, April 15th at 9:30 a.m. And for the directors who can join us 30 minutes earlier at 9 a.m. to do sort of a hello meet and greet. What we used to do via coffee or with coffee in person, we'll try to do with one another prior to the 9:30 start of the board meeting. So thanks everyone, appreciate it. Have a really nice day. And with that, we are adjourned until our next meeting.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Chair Gore.